There comes a moment in every person's life when they realize that greatness isn't created on the days when everything feels easy. Anyone can show up when they're motivated, when they're excited, when the world seems to be cheering them on. But the people who transform their lives, the ones who build legacies, are the ones who show up especially on the days when they don't feel like it. Consistency is not a feeling. Consistency is a decision. A commitment, a standard you set for your life. If you only act when you're inspired, you will live a life of inconsistency. But if you learn to act from discipline, from purpose, from an inner fire that doesn't depend on your mood, then you become unstoppable. Think about it. Your feelings fluctuate. They rise and fall like the weather. Some mornings you wake up energized, unstoppable, ready to conquer. Other mornings it feels like you're dragging the weight of the world behind you. But your standards, your commitment, those must remain unshakable. The strongest version of you is not the one who performs at their peak when everything is perfect. The strongest version of you is the one who performs even when it feels like everything is falling apart. You don't need motivation every day. You need a system, a standard, a habit of showing up. Let me tell you something powerful. Your brain is trained by what you repeatedly do. Not what you do when you feel good, but what you do consistently. Every time you follow through on your commitment, even when you feel tired, even when you feel doubtful, even when you feel scared, you're teaching your mind that you are in control, not your emotions. Because emotions are like waves. They crash, they recede, they return. But your decisions can become like mountains. Solid, stable, grounded. You must decide, who are you? Are you someone who follows their feelings, or someone who leads their life? When you wake up tired, show up. When you don't feel confident, show up. When you're frustrated, show up. When the world doubts you, show up harder. There's a version of you that you haven't even met yet. A version who is stronger, more disciplined, more capable, more resilient. And the only bridge between where you are and who you can become is consistency, especially on the days you don't feel like it. You see, greatness is forged in discomfort. Champions are built in repetition. Success is shaped by discipline, not emotion. Every time you choose consistency, you're casting a vote for the future you want. Every time you take action despite your mood, you're rewriting your identity. Every time you push forward, you are declaring, I am in command of my life. So stop waiting to feel ready. Stop waiting for inspiration. Stop waiting for the perfect moment, because consistency creates the perfect moment. It creates momentum, it creates identity, it creates mastery. Your feelings will try to negotiate with you. They will say, take a break, skip today, you deserve to rest. But greatness doesn't negotiate. It decides, it commits, it follows through. Be the kind of person who doesn't need the world to clap for you to do the work. Be the kind of person who moves forward with or without excitement. Be the kind of person who stays consistent, not because it's easy, but because it's who you are. Remember this, you don't rise to the level of your dreams, you rise to the level of your standards, and your standards are revealed by your consistency. So today, commit to this truth. Be consistent no matter how you feel. Because your feelings don't define your destiny. Your actions do, your choices do, your consistency does. Show up today, show up tomorrow, show up every day, and watch how your life transforms. Consistency is a decision, not an emotion. When you let that truth sink into your bones, your entire understanding of progress, discipline, and personal power changes. Most people live their lives controlled by how they feel in the moment, as if emotions are the ultimate authority. They wake up and ask themselves, do I feel like working today? Do I feel motivated enough? Do I feel inspired? And when the answer is no, they shrink, they hesitate, they delay the actions that would move their lives forward. But the individuals who reshape their destiny recognize that feelings are temporary and unreliable, while decisions and standards can be permanent if you choose them to be. Consistency is created the moment you decide that your commitment matters more than your mood. There comes a time where you realize that if your emotions are driving your behavior, you are always going to be inconsistent. One day you'll feel strong, the next day you'll feel tired. One day you'll feel confident, the next day doubt creeps in. One day you'll feel unstoppable, the next day you'll question everything. If you tie your actions to those shifts, your life becomes chaotic, unpredictable, and fragmented. But when you commit to a standard, to showing up, to pushing forward, to honoring your decision regardless of how you feel, you start to access a different level of power, a level most people never experience because they are too busy negotiating with their emotions. The truth is, your feelings are not designed to lead you toward long-term growth. They're designed to help you survive short-term situations. Emotions react to comfort, to fear, to uncertainty. They tell you to stay safe, stay still, stay where you are. But consistency is about stepping beyond that, choosing actions that your future self will thank you for, even when your present self resists. When you make the decision to act based on your standards rather than your emotions, you begin rewiring your identity. You stop identifying as someone who waits for motivation, and you start becoming someone who creates momentum. You stop waiting for the perfect emotional state, and you become someone who builds progress through intentional action. You have to decide what kind of person you want to be long before your emotions try to influence your behavior. If you are someone who acts only when you feel good, you will always fall short of your potential. But if you decide that you are someone who follows through, someone who honors their word, someone who moves forward regardless of emotional fluctuations, you start shaping a new identity. And your identity shapes your behavior far more powerfully than motivation ever could. That's why consistency is a decision. It's a declaration of who you are, not a reaction to how you feel. Think about the areas of life where progress matters most: health, career, relationships, personal growth. None of these improve because you feel good every day. They improve because you decide to show up, to put in the reps, to maintain discipline even when your mind offers excuses. Excuses are emotional. Discipline is chosen, excuses reflect temporary discomfort. Consistency reflects long-term commitment, and commitment is something you choose day after day, with or without emotional alignment. When you make consistency a decision, you also eliminate negotiation. You remove that inner dialogue that wastes time and drains energy. You stop asking yourself whether you feel like doing the work and start telling yourself that the work is simply what happens next. The moment you decide that your standards lead your behavior, your emotions lose their power over your direction. Yes, they still show up. Yes, there will be days when you feel tired, unmotivated, or frustrated. But your actions don't bend to those feelings anymore. You can acknowledge them without surrendering to them. You can feel discomfort without letting it determine your choices. People who achieve remarkable things are not emotionally superhuman. They simply learn to separate their actions from their feelings. They learned that consistency builds confidence, that confidence builds momentum, and momentum builds a life that is shaped by intentional choices rather than emotional reactions. You become dangerous in the best way when your emotions can no longer derail your commitment. You become steady, reliable, unstoppable in the direction you've chosen. Every time you act based on your decision rather than your emotion, you strengthen that identity. You reinforce the message to yourself that you are in control. Not your fatigue, not your doubts, not your fears, not your moods. You create a new internal pattern where action leads and emotions follow, rather than the other way around. Show up especially on the days you don't feel like it, because those are the days that define you at your core. Anyone can move forward when everything feels aligned, when life is smooth, when energy is high and inspiration is overflowing. But the days when you wake up with doubt in your chest, when you feel heavy, when your mind whispers every excuse it can think of, those are the days that shape the person you are becoming. Those are the days that test your commitment, your resilience, your inner strength. And nothing builds a stronger identity than pushing through resistance when every emotion is pulling you in the opposite direction. There is something powerful that happens when you take action in moments of discomfort. You discover that you're capable of far more than your feelings suggest. Most people let their emotions dictate their ability to show up. If they feel tired, they stop. If they feel discouraged, they pause. If they feel unsure, they pull back. And because of that, they never build the resilience required to handle the weight of their own potential. They end up living a life based on how they temporarily feel rather than who they truly are. But the people who stand out, the people who elevate their lives, are the ones who build the discipline to show up regardless of their emotional state. Think about how many dreams have died not because someone lacked talent or opportunity, but because they didn't show up on the days they felt low. Momentum dies quietly, not in big dramatic moments, but in small decisions made on difficult days. The decision to skip. The decision to rest just this once. The decision to quit early because the energy isn't there. These small choices compound over time, and eventually a person realizes they've moved further away from their potential without even noticing it. That is why showing up on the days you don't feel like it is not just important. It's essential. Those difficult days are actually your greatest training ground. They teach you how to work without relying on motivation. They teach you how to move forward even when your emotions are not cooperating. They teach you that your strength doesn't come from the ease of the moment, but from your ability to push through the weight of resistance. Every time you show up while carrying heaviness, you are building a version of yourself that understands pressure, understands fatigue, understands frustration, yet refuses to be controlled by them. You are developing psychological stamina, an internal toughness that makes future challenges feel smaller because you've trained your mind to move anyway. Action taken on hard days carries more weight than action taken on easy ones. One step on a difficult day can equal 10 steps on a normal one because it strengthens your identity. It tells your mind, I am someone who follows through no matter what. And once your mind believes that, the world around you begins to shift. You hold yourself differently. You approach tasks differently. You carry a level of confidence that comes not from success, but from the discipline that creates success. You begin to trust yourself at a deeper level because you've proven that you won't abandon your goals when your emotions fluctuate. And here's the truth most people overlook. The days you don't feel like showing up are the days when breakthroughs often begin. Not in visible results, not in sudden achievements, but inside you, in the quiet rewiring of your identity. You start learning that discomfort is not a stop sign, that fatigue is not a barrier, that doubt is not a command to retreat. You realize that your body and mind can do far more than they tell you in the moment. Most limitations are emotional, not actual, and the only way to break them is to act in spite of them. Showing up when you don't feel like it also prevents the erosion of your momentum. It's easy to lose progress. It slips away quickly when discipline fades. But when you take even a small action on a hard day, you keep the wheels turning. You keep the internal engine alive. You protect the progress you've already earned. That alone can make the difference between someone who transforms their life and someone who keeps restarting their journey over and over again. The days you don't want to show up will always come. They're part of the process. But they are also opportunities to separate yourself from the average, to build a different level of grit, to strengthen the identity of someone who doesn't break just because the moment feels heavy. And when you show up in those moments, you're reinforcing that you are committed to your higher standard, not your lower feelings. You're teaching your mind that actions lead and emotions follow. You're becoming someone whose discipline is bigger than their doubt, whose vision is stronger than their excuses, and whose consistency is greater than their mood. Your identity is shaped by what you repeatedly do, not by what you occasionally feel. This is one of the most life-changing truths anyone can embrace, because most people believe that their identity is something fixed, something shaped by their past or their personality or their emotions. But identity is not built from what you think about occasionally or what you feel inspired to do every now and then. It is built from your patterns, your habits, your daily choices. It's built from the things you do consistently, even when the feeling isn't there. Every action you repeat is like casting a vote for the type of person you are becoming, and the more votes you cast, the more deeply that identity becomes embedded into your subconscious. People often say they want to be disciplined, confident, strong, or successful, but they wait for the right emotional state to behave that way. They wait for motivation to kick in, for inspiration to show up, for energy to feel perfect. But the reality is this: your identity can't be built on emotion because emotion is temporary. Identity must be built on behavior because behavior is what sticks. Emotion comes and goes, but habits stay. Emotion fluctuates, but patterns solidify. Emotion reacts to circumstances, but identity determines how you respond to them. Think about the people who achieve the most in any area of life. They're not the ones who feel positive and motivated every day. They're the ones who choose actions that align with the identity they want to build over and over again until that identity becomes automatic. If you repeatedly get up early and train, you eventually become someone who sees yourself as consistent and disciplined. If you repeatedly work on your craft when others are resting, you become someone who identifies as committed and focused. If you repeatedly push yourself when you feel resistance, you become someone who sees yourself as resilient and unstoppable. The actions carve the identity, not the feelings, and it works in both directions. If you repeatedly avoid challenges, you start to believe you're someone who shies away from pressure. If you repeatedly procrastinate, you begin to identify as someone who struggles with follow-through. If you repeatedly quit when things get hard, your identity adapts to that pattern. Identity doesn't judge your intentions. It internalizes your repeated behaviors. This is why you must be intentional about what you do, not just what you feel. The most profound part of this truth is that you are not trapped by your past identity. You can change who you are at any moment by changing what you repeatedly do. You can become disciplined even if you've never been consistent. You can become confident even if your past is full of doubt. You can become strong even if you've felt weak for years. All it takes is choosing the behaviors that match the identity you want, and repeating them long enough for that identity to take root. It's not about massive change overnight. It's about consistent actions that slowly rewire how you see yourself. Every time you follow through on a commitment, even a small one, you're reinforcing an identity of reliability. Every time you push through discomfort, you're reinforcing an identity of strength. Every time you act without waiting for motivation, you're reinforcing an identity of discipline. These small actions compound. They begin to carry weight. You start proving to yourself through evidence that you are capable of becoming the person you envision. And once your mind believes something about who you are, your behavior becomes easier to maintain because now it's aligned with the identity you hold. When people say, "I wish I was more consistent," what they're really saying is, "I wish I saw myself as the type of person who follows through." But the path to that identity isn't wishing, it's doing. It's showing up, repeating the behavior, and letting the identity grow out of the repetition. You must act in alignment with the identity you want before that identity feels real, because the feeling comes after the behavior, not before it. Your identity is essentially the story you tell yourself about who you are. But that story is shaped by your actions far more than your emotions. You can feel unmotivated and still behave like someone who is disciplined. You can feel scared and still behave like someone who is courageous. You can feel doubtful and still behave like someone who is committed. And every time you behave in alignment with the identity you want, you weaken the identity that held you back. This is how real transformation happens, not from sudden bursts of motivation, not from inspirational moments that fade when life gets heavy, but from daily choices that accumulate into a powerful sense of self. What you repeatedly do becomes who you are, and who you are becomes the foundation for everything you are capable of building. Discipline creates momentum, momentum creates mastery, and mastery creates transformation. This is the sequence that changes a life, and it always begins with discipline. Not excitement, not motivation, not inspiration. Discipline. That quiet, often uncomfortable decision to do what needs to be done even when you'd rather do anything else. Discipline is the spark that lights the fire, because without it, nothing moves, nothing grows, nothing evolves. Every great achievement, every transformation, every breakthrough starts with someone choosing discipline long before the results ever showed up. People often talk about wanting momentum, wanting that feeling where everything starts to click, where progress feels automatic, where energy rises because the results are flowing. But momentum isn't something you magically wake up with. Momentum is earned, built, constructed from the small choices you make every day. It comes from repeated discipline, from showing up when you'd rather avoid the challenge, from taking action before you feel ready. Each disciplined action is like pushing a heavy wheel, slow at first, resistant, uncomfortable, but as you keep pushing, it starts to roll. The resistance decreases, the movement becomes smoother, and eventually the wheel begins to spin with its own force. That is momentum. Once momentum is created, everything becomes easier, not because the work has changed, but because you have changed. The same tasks that once felt heavy begin to feel natural. The same effort that felt draining starts to feel energizing. You begin to crave progress instead of resisting it. You stop relying on motivation because momentum becomes its own fuel. But the only way to reach this stage is through the initial discipline that pushes you past the first phase of difficulty, doubt, and discomfort. And then comes mastery. Mastery doesn't happen from sporadic effort or from occasional bursts of motivation. Mastery is the result of repeated action layered on top of momentum created through discipline. When you do something repeatedly and consistently, it starts to become part of you. You understand it differently, you move differently. Your confidence rises not from theory but from evidence, the evidence of your own repeated effort. Mastery is when the actions that once required willpower now happen almost effortlessly because your mind and body understand the rhythm. You've practiced it, you've lived it, you've earned it. Mastery also changes the way you deal with challenges. Instead of viewing difficulty as a setback, you see it as feedback. Instead of feeling defeated by obstacles, you study them, you adapt, you get better. You start to play the long game, and your identity becomes intertwined with the process of improvement. At this level, the work itself becomes rewarding because you can see your own evolution happening through it. And that's something momentum alone can't give you. Only mastery can. And once mastery begins to take shape, transformation becomes inevitable. Transformation is not a moment. It's not a sudden miracle or a dramatic shift that appears out of nowhere. Transformation is the accumulated effect of discipline practiced consistently, momentum maintained intentionally, and mastery developed patiently. Transformation is the point where you no longer recognize the older version of yourself. The version that avoided discomfort, the version that hesitated, the version that struggled to follow through. Your mindset shifts, your habits shift, your self-belief shifts. You begin to operate from a higher standard, a higher level of energy, a higher level of awareness. Transformation shows up in the way you speak to yourself, in the way you carry yourself, in the way you handle difficult days. It shows up when people around you notice that you think differently, act differently, react differently. Not because you were born that way, but because you built yourself that way through the chain reaction that started with discipline. Transformation always comes last, but people often want it first. They want the transformation without the discipline, without the grind, without the slow accumulation of practiced effort. But transformation only exists as the natural outcome of the foundation you've built. The beauty of this entire process is that it's available to anyone. You don't need to be gifted, you don't need perfect circumstances, you don't need endless motivation. All you need is the willingness to begin with discipline, even when it feels small, even when it feels slow, even when it feels like nothing is happening, because something is happening. Every time you choose discipline, you're building momentum. Every time you continue momentum, you're building mastery. And every time you live in mastery, you're stepping closer to transformation. It is a chain reaction, a powerful unfolding that begins the moment you decide to take control of your actions instead of waiting for your emotions to empower you. Greatness comes from commitment, not motivation, and the people who rise to extraordinary levels in life are the ones who follow through no matter what. Motivation is a beautiful spark, but it is temporary, inconsistent, and unpredictable. It shows up when life feels exciting, when the path feels clear, when energy is high, but commitment, that deeper, stronger force, lives beyond emotion. Commitment is what remains when motivation disappears, and this is where true greatness is born, not in the moments of passion, but in the moments of discipline, not in the days the work feels easy, but in the days when everything in you wants to give up. Most people misunderstand greatness. They think it belongs to the chosen few, the lucky ones, the ones with natural talent or perfect circumstances. But greatness belongs to those who decide they will not quit. It belongs to the person who keeps moving forward even when it hurts, even when it's slow, even when it feels like no one is watching. Because greatness is built in the dark. Greatness is built when you push yourself through resistance. Greatness is built when your mind says stop and you answer back with persistence. The world sees the results, but the real work happens in silence, in solitude, in those private moments where commitment is tested again and again. Commitment means you don't negotiate with your excuses. It means you don't let your emotions decide your future. It means you don't wait to feel ready because you know readiness is a luxury that rarely comes. Commitment is the choice to follow your path even when the feeling isn't there, and that choice is powerful because it reshapes your identity. Every time you act from commitment instead of emotion, you strengthen the belief that you are someone who can rely on yourself. That self-trust becomes one of your greatest advantages. When you trust yourself to show up regardless of how you feel, you become dangerous in the best possible way. There will be many days where your mind tries to pull you backward. Days when you feel tired, discouraged, overwhelmed. Days when progress seems invisible. Days when you question everything. Those days are not signs to stop. They are invitations to rise. They are opportunities to prove to yourself that you are committed not just when the road is smooth, but when the path is steep. Commitment is forged in discomfort. Every time you choose to continue despite the challenge, you reinforce the message that you are in control. Not your environment, not your mood, not your doubts. Commitment also creates consistency, and consistency creates results. You cannot become great by doing something occasionally. You become great by doing it repetitively, intentionally, relentlessly. It's the person who keeps showing up who eventually masters their craft. It's the person who continues to practice after enthusiasm fades who eventually stands out. Ordinary people become extraordinary through repeated action, not through random bursts of motivation. It is the accumulation of small, disciplined steps taken over and over that leads to massive growth. There will always be people who start strong but fade quickly because they rely on motivation. Motivation is fragile. The moment adversity hits, motivation shatters, but commitment stands firm. Commitment remains when the excitement disappears. Commitment is what wakes you up early when you want to sleep in. Commitment is what pushes you through another hour of work when your mind tells you to stop. Commitment is what keeps you on the path long enough for progress to become visible. One of the most profound truths is that you don't have to feel inspired to change your life. You just need to stay committed. Your feelings may resist, but your actions can lead. Your emotions may fluctuate, but your standards can remain. And when you choose action over emotion, you begin to create momentum. When the mind sees that you act regardless of how you feel, it begins to align with your behavior. Your emotions start to follow your actions instead of your actions following your emotions. This is how champions are built. This is how confidence grows. This is how identity strengthens. Commitment also protects you from the trap of temporary satisfaction. When you're committed, you're not controlled by the need for instant rewards. You understand the long game. You understand that the payoff comes to those who endure the process. Commitment teaches you patience, resilience, focus. It teaches you to value progress over perfection and consistency over intensity. And this is why committed people outperform motivated people in the long run. Motivation starts the race, commitment finishes it. The truth is, the future belongs to those who can continue without the applause. To those who can show up without being told. To those who can keep moving even when no one sees their effort. When you commit to something fully, you eliminate the option of quitting. You eliminate the internal debate. You free yourself from the emotional roller coaster that stops most people from ever achieving what they're capable of. Commitment makes you unstoppable because it becomes your standard, your identity, your way of living.